Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Cristina Cubillo Santos. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, please click like and subscribe. This is episode 2 of a mini series with my dear friend Emily here. And we're talking about self-alignment, what that really is. And today we're going deeper into actually social anxiety and FOMO and what that really is and how that can point to our shadow self and what that can mean. So, Emily, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me this month. And let's kick it off. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people I feel like can relate to, that envy, or when we open up these social apps, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and we're constantly bombarded with pretty images and people sharing the beauty of their life and the positive aspects of their life. And it's very easy to get carried away. It's like, oh my God, how are they doing that? I suck. Everything in my life sucks, right? And we compare ourselves a lot. I mean, I know I've been there in the past. It's not a great feeling. Or when I was working a lot of hours, I didn't have the time to hang out and join all the parties and the events that my colleagues and friends were doing. And yeah, it can really bring up some stuff inside that's not pleasant to deal with. But nonetheless, we have to deal with it in order to like we said in our previous episode, get unstuck in life and get back to that alignment with ourselves. So let's recap a little bit for those people who maybe didn't have the chance to see our previous episode, and just briefly discuss that concept of self-alignment and what that might mean for you.
Yeah, so in our last episode, we approached the very, very broad topic of what is self-alignment and why it might be a good thing to achieve in order for you to be happier in your life. And for me, just briefly, self-alignment is nothing more than self-awareness plus action, meaning that you start stepping out of your own self to be an observer, like a third-party observer almost, and you start observing what's going on without any judgment, without any labeling, and that takes practice. And now with that new information, you put it into action, meaning you ask yourself, well, how can I heal it? How can I have a better relationship with it so that ultimately I can be free from kind of the shackles that it's imposed on me? Because now everything you're doing on a subconscious level, every decision that you make, every reaction that you have is being guided or influenced by those past wounds or traumas or whatever your insecurities might be. And the goal of all this is to kind of break free of that so that you can heal your relationship with those things so they're no longer an influence on you. And you can choose what kind of influence that you want to be under, because we're always under the influence of something, to degrees that we're not even really conscious of. So in these emotions that are coming up, you said that the good word was that it was like an icky emotion, an unpleasant thing that you don't like feeling. And I think the first step is to not antagonize emotions. They are just simple signals. Yes, some are unpleasant, or some are deemed unpleasant, some are deemed pleasant, but they're just simple signals that are indicating to you where you are. So in that way, they're your friend because they're helping you understand what it is. And when you understand something, then you have the power to actually change it if you wish.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said about, kind of being an observer outside of yourself. There's a principle that I work with in Chinese medicine, utilizing the 8 extraordinary meridians. And one of the points in the body called kidney 9, it's actually the spiritual aspect of the action of that point is exactly that, to allow the patient to see themselves as a guest of their own life and observe themselves outside of themselves and understand, what is this process that I'm going through? What is coming up? What are these emotions that are maybe icky or unpleasant? And what are the past traumas that we've gone through? So yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that from your perspective. And so yeah, let's talk a little bit about what is that FOMO thing, right? I didn't even know what that meant several years ago. Oh my God, all these like kids, they use these little shorthand things. I really don't understand what's going on here.
So FOMO is just basically an acronym that stands for, it's spelled FOMO, and it just means fear of missing out. Um, whether it, I today want to, with you, kind of demystify what is FOMO and kind of understand it a little bit. I think more people are affected by it than they think. And because of the word fear of it, they think, oh, it must be a phobia of not being included in some kind of cool thing that other people are doing and showing on social media. And I don't think it's necessarily that. So if we take out the word fear and just replace it with just a slight icky feeling or a discomfort of not being included in something that other people are doing. And it's not the event necessarily that you have to be a part of. You don't have to go bungee jumping with them or sailing or something like that. It's just the desire to be included. They're having fun. They look like they're bonding. They're having a great time. They look like they're happy. And that's something we all as humans want. We want to be included. We want to feel community. We want to feel human connection. And we want to feel happy as a part of that group. And that all comes from evolutionary reasons. Like if we were never part of a tribe or a community, that was a threat to survival. So the fact that you want to feel that way, first, there's nothing wrong with it. And second, it's not like a fear of a phobia in a phobia sense, but it's more of feeling a little bit left out and yearning for that, but not feeling like you have access to it.
Yeah, it's like longing, right? Longing
Yeah,
to, yeah.
yeah. So it's a longing, and that's completely normal. And then the part though that really makes FOMO a little bit different than let's say just simply yearning for something is that there's a part of us that might not feel that we have access to that, or we can create that kind of vibe that event or whatever is creating, or it seems like it's creating through your telephone screen. We don't feel empowered to create that in our lives ourselves. And we don't feel like we currently have that in our lives ourselves. Otherwise, the grass wouldn't look so green over there. So it's just about A, wanting to feel belonging, which is a normal human emotion and desire, and B, not feeling disempowered and not having enough agency to maybe find that in our lives ourselves. So we are dependent on the events that other people are creating for us to be invited to them and then jump on their bandwagon and be included in that. And we think that's the only way we can share in that community and that bonding and achieve that feeling of happiness.
Yeah, I had and one of earlier memories when I was a child. I think it was my dad. I can't remember if my mom was there, but it was several people, and they were like, "Okay, let's go, jump in the car. We're gonna go see someone like a cousin or something." And for some reason, I didn't want to go. And then they got in the car. They were like, "Okay, no worries." And we were in the countryside where my grandparents had a house. And they were like, "Okay, well, no worries, you'll stay with the grandparents." And as they were driving off, I had that exact feeling like, "Oh my God, I'm missing out on something. Why did I say no?" And I was very little, maybe like 5 years old, 4 years old. I can't remember exactly. I know it was before my grandfather died, and I was only 6.5 when he passed. So just at that young age, I had that feeling of missing out. It was so strong. And I just remember running after the car, even though they left already. It was so strong. And then in high school as well, I had that feeling. There were just little cliques of communities, right? And I just felt left out. I felt like an oddball. I didn't really belong to the popular crowd. I didn't belong to the nerdy crowd. I was just kind of like a loner. I did have a friend who kind of was my best friend at the time, but it's just that I feel like innately we all need that tribe, like you said. And until we are able to see within ourselves and know that we are enough, that we really don't need all these external circumstances, events, and even people, even though it's nice to belong. When we work on ourselves and get back to that alignment with self, which of course I'll let you talk about that now. I think we all suffer from that longing to belong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your example is not that far from, for example, and FOMO is not either. It's not that far from the average feeling of envy or jealousy that you might have when you see somebody you like with dating somebody else, or when you see somebody else, like your friends, achieving something that you've always wanted. It's a great sign because it just clarifies to you, again, in the whole theme of not antagonizing your emotions, even though they feel unpleasant. It's a great sign that indicates to you, well, what do you want? What is important to you? And now your next question is, well, how do I go and attain that? And the roadblock for many people is that they feel like they can't in some ways. And then the next question for you then is to understand, in this whole process of self-alignment and uncovering, peeling back each of the layers of why, it's then understanding, well, why don't I feel like I can achieve that? Do I not feel deserving of that? Do I not feel empowered enough? Do I not have enough confidence about my own skills and talents to be able to create that same level of happiness within my life, so that I can look at somebody else doing those things and just simply be happy for them? Because it's like, yeah, that's awesome. I have that too. And I'm really glad. I understand what it feels like to be that excited and that happy in doing it. So I'm really glad you got to feel that too. So it's not any longer a competition, you know? And you brought up a point of just how this ties into the overarching theme of self-alignment. Well, when you go through self-alignment, a big chunk of it is not only building confidence about the things that you do well, but it's also facing the sides of you that aren't so nice to see. And it's understanding that you don't have those shadow sides of you, or you don't have those insecurities because you're defective. You have them because something in your life, you know, when you were young, you didn't have certain needs met, and you were a baby, you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Or the type of parents you had, the kind of family you grew into, or the life experiences that you have will leave you with certain, I guess, bad memories of certain things, whether you recall them or not. Because a lot of times, as time goes on and we process more information, the old memories start kind of getting archived at a subconscious level where they don't really exist as far as we're concerned, but they're there.
Yeah.
And every time this icky feeling is coming up, it's surfacing and it's presenting an opportunity for you to address it. And since self-alignment is all about addressing those things and healing them, reintegrating them, so that you eventually can become whole and then step into your true power of all the things that you're capable of, because now you don't have the lack of confidence and the lack of self-worth to impede you anymore. FOMO is just one example of that. So in the context of FOMO, we can see how we can reintegrate those sides of us to heal it.
Yeah. And it's a process. I mean, it takes time, you know, sometimes it's like people go to therapy for years and years, uncovering more and more layers of themselves. And that's great. But really, when more and more of those things start to surface, and when we can really sit with ourselves, and, you know, there are methods like journaling, or even screaming and crying out loud, or in Chinese medicine and Qigong, we shake our body to really shake out ourselves and create that energetic movement within ourselves, and different types of movement as well. All of that can be part of that healing process and getting back into aligning with self. What are some of the tools that maybe you've used in your personal life, or have maybe heard about other people utilize to work through these parts of yourself in order to feel better, even if we're not feeling completely good, you know, in this moment in time?
Well, of the spectrum of things that I've observed in order to to kind of address some of these areas that are coming up, I think that the first and most common thing that people do is intellectualize things, because understanding gives us a sense of control. If we understand what's happening in this terrain, then we can better navigate, and we're not kind of taking a dive in the dark. And it can be scary stuff because it's really unpleasant. So I think that the most common way I see people addressing it is intellectualizing it, understanding it, which is great, because now you have the tools and the words to say, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And that affirmation is huge. It's a big step. So with respect to FOMO, if you're feeling, as you're scrolling through social media, I don't know if you feel this, but I know that sometimes after getting off of Facebook or Instagram, I feel a little bit like heavy, like something's like heavy and clouded here. Like
It
I was
has
like
happened.
awesome. Yeah. Like I was awesome a moment ago. And then after seeing this, I just kind of feel like, eh. And it's so subtle that we probably brush it off. But if you're feeling anything, I think the first step is to acknowledge like, oh, okay, there's something there. I'm not just, it's not out of nowhere. I'm not just, it's not some sort of illusion or something like that, that there might be something there. And it talks to you in a whisper at first. It's not loud and it's not apparent. And then it's understanding, well, why do I feel this way? And every time you ask yourself why, you peel your back a layer of understanding and getting closer to the root cause. And that's why we say it's important not to judge yourself during the process, because if you need to get to the core layer, judging yourself is just adding another layer on top of that and saying, oh, I can't feel here what's underneath because I feel stupid feeling it. So you can never really get to the root of the thing. So yeah, to go back to that, it's kind of understanding it from a logical perspective, I find people are most comfortable with. And then as you get more and more connected to your body and your emotions, and every time a small little bubble comes up to the surface and you recognize that better, I think more and more people start moving into, well, how can I move my body or use my body? Like you said, there's like dancing meditations where you're kind of shaking it out, in Qigong as well, where you're moving certain energies. And you get to a point where you start feeling it more in your body, kind of thing. I know that I have a very revealing moment, because I'm quite the skeptic. I'm pretty logical and scientific about these things, very practical. So a lot of the things that I couldn't see, taste, touch, smell, whatever, I had a hard time believing. And energy, you can't really see it or touch it, right? And I noticed that during a really difficult time in my life, I was just doing yoga, just as I usually do. But something really drew me to just wanting to do a few cat cows, which for those of you who might not know, it's just kind of like getting on all fours and kind of, pushing your back, arching it up, and then letting your belly sink and stuff like that. It's just movement. And I just started bawling and I just started crying. And there will be a moment where you might as well too, as you're uncovering this relationship between the psychosomatic relationship, you're like, am I crazy? Why am I just doing these movements, and why is it releasing all these things? But it's, again, when something is new and unfamiliar to you, try to acknowledge and validate that it's happening for some reason, that it's happening because it's legitimate. So yeah, I find that finding an understanding of it, finding it in your body also, and we are all familiar, or a lot of us are, that we hold a lot of emotions in our flesh, in our adipose tissue in particular. So a lot of dieting people will talk about and saying, well, if your adipose tissue is where you're storing all of your emotions that you haven't really made peace with or let go of, and you're trying to lose weight, well, it's kind of like trying to throw out a box that's storing all that stuff when you haven't emptied out that box first. So of course, the weight is going to stay because your flesh is what's holding on to a lot of the emotions you haven't addressed. And going a level deeper, there are some people who have gone even beyond it and have absorbed that in even a layer deeper. beyond their adipose tissue and into their bones. So for people who've done that, I know that there is like craniosacral therapy where people kind of manipulate certain parts of your skull that are connected to other bones too, energetically or nerve-wise, and they release it that way. I know people who have done kind of this humming, like when you watch the Tibetan monks and you hear them do that deep like sound, it's almost like the acoustics are like in a cave, but they're generating that all from here, from different points of their body. It's vibrating certain bones that have the same frequency. So those are the different ways and layers that I've experienced people release it or have heard of people release it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned different body tissues because, you know, I was talking about that the other day. And in Chinese medicine, each of the organ systems is associated with specific body tissue. So I was talking about the earth element because now we're in the season of the late summer. We're going from the fire element into the earth element, and the earth element governs the spleen and the stomach. And the spleen is associated with the muscle flesh. And so what I've been discovering with my clients and patients, that there's a lot of like muscle aches, and because this is also a season of dampness and spleen is called the queen of dampness, there's a lot of heaviness in the body. So it's really interesting how it's all interconnected and how different body tissues hold and store emotions and tension and, you know, yeah, even fear of missing out.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point because I, in the beginning, have had a really hard time, even culturally, even growing up with these ideas that all these things that aren't physically connected to us are still having an influence on us. That was something hard for me to wrap my head around. And I now have come to understand that all these things are really influencing us too. You can't see it. You can't see, you know, the vibrations of things or necessarily coming and you absorbing them. But there is something to be said. And I thought that was absolutely liberating because it didn't make me feel like I was the source of this feeling weird or heavy or sad or whatever, that there were other things in effect that were influencing me. And actually, a very interesting evolutionary fact was before we had language, that skill of coming into a room, being surrounded by people or things, or going out into nature and feeling that was something that we as a species really depended on because we didn't have language to communicate that. So your survival relied on you being able to walk into a space and feel and pick up and absorb on everything that was around you and what energies they were giving off, because that was the form of communication. That's how you knew if you walked into a group of people, your tribe of people, and they had a collective fear going on, right? Because there was some sort of threat, you instantly walked in and you felt that. And now you knew what was going on. That's how you were informed. Yeah. And it happens today, even though we have languages. You know, you walked into a room after like your friend and their partner have fought, and they say, oh my God, the tension was so heavy, you could cut it with a knife. Absolutely. These expressions all came from those things, those feelings that people acknowledged. So yeah, I think all of this awareness is feeding into what you talk about in terms of what are your surroundings bringing you, surrounding yourself with good people and good energy. And even if you're not feeling good energy, it's also asking yourself, well, is it something that's coming from me? Meaning, am I not feeling good because something is triggering me, not necessarily because that person is a source of bad energy. So all this self-awareness stuff are the tiny steps that cumulatively make up the mosaic of coming closer to self-alignment.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. And yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that energy aspect in a room full of people, right? Even before language was formed, because I was going to make that same analogy in just a little different way. You know, like living in New York City, we are constantly traveling long distances and you're on a subway cart with all kinds of people. And sometimes you walk into a subway cart and it just feels heavy. And then you walk into another subway cart and it just feels light and positive. And this is something that majority of people can't really explain, but these are the energies that you just mentioned, right? So the sooner we look inside and feel ourselves and address that, the easier we'll be able to self-align and live a happier life, because that's really what it is about. Live a joyful, happy life without comparison and envy, and spreading loving kindness. I talk a lot about loving kindness, and I think that practice is underutilized a lot. So,
Yeah.
Emily, thank you so much again for joining me today. It's also always a pleasure to have you speak from your experience, and we'll see you soon for our
Yes.
episode 3. Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
all. Take
Next
care.
time.
And don't forget to click like and subscribe for more content of this sort. Have a great day.